Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? I'm not a cop, but I worked crime scene. This guy had attached GPS to the bottom of people's cars who owned houses. He wanted to rob. He did it to ensure they wouldn't be showing up while he was ransacking the place. My favorite was the guy who stole a post office mailbox off the street, repainted it, and then put it next to the night deposit box at a bank, and hung an out-of-order sign on the deposit box. All the businesses came along and dropped off their deposits in the mailbox. I remember an officer telling me about a B&E alarm he and his team responded to. No one was there to report the alarm. It must have been a security monitoring company that called. When police showed up, everything seemed normal. Most lights were off, and there was an employee still working. Explains he was there working late and must have set off an alarm. They almost believed him until he said, before saying the name of the company he worked for. After that it was downhill, but with a little more research he would have pretty much gotten away with it. A guy that first went to high school had been stealing from Walmart in a pretty clever way. He would grab video games, MP3 players, beer etc., and throw them away in a trash can in the garden section. The workers never checked the trash contents and he would just wait, sometimes 5 hours until they emptied the trash in the back dumpster and hop in to get his items. Once he took a cardboard box from a display inside, filled it with video games, a PS3, and extra controllers. He grabbed some tape and pens and drew all over the box and taped it up to make it look used and tossed it. An hour later he had a whole new PS3 and stack of games. I heard about one person that pulled a shoplifting scam on a large, popular and well-known U.S. retail store. They walked in with some cheap nylon product to get one of those. I walked in with this. Stickers they used to put on returning merchandise. The sticker easily peeled off the product undamaged. They walked to the electronics department, grabbed an expensive box off the shelf and went to customer service. They placed the sticker on the big box and asked if they could return the item without a receipt. Unfortunately, no, not without the original receipt. Dang it, and they walk out. Customer service even gave the doorman the thumbs up, having just interacted with the customer. This took place before widespread inventory controls and cameras absolutely everywhere. Working in a home improvement store when younger. This guy came in, went to the snowblowers, took one and went to the return desk, said he wanted to return it but had no receipt. They told him you need a receipt, so he says okay I'll be back and wheels it off to car through the front door. He did this a few times apparently. Couple places even helped him load it back into his car. There's a golf course country club in my town that has a PGA tournament scheduled in the next couple years. They have a guy repeatedly breaking in overnight and just lounging around and eating food, all on camera. The club refuses to report it so they don't hurt their chances of the tournament coming. A French thief who spent 10 years in prison became a comedian when he got out. One of his stories: finds a building, goes in, chooses a floor and transforms the exit door into an extra apartment, puts the apartment number, fake lock, welcome rug, etc., puts an iPhone for sale. The person comes to buy it. He opens the door in a shower robe and says give me 1 second. I am just gonna count the money. And poof, he's gone from the exit stairs. Definitely this guy who ate the bank robbery note right off the hood of the police car when they were emptying his pockets, although I'm fairly sure he was still convicted. Same thing as the computer rooms. Guys would cut the power to electrical stations, damage the wiring, then hide waiting for the cops to show up. Once the owners of the buildings came they would shut off the power because of the unsafe wiring that would have to be repaired in the morning. Everyone would leave for the night. Then would cut away all the non-powered wiring to get the copper. Not a cop. We got called for a rollover car accident. We get there and the car is empty, so we think he got ejected. My partner and I start looking for a body nearby. A few minutes later a cop tells us that they think the driver is a mile down the road walking. We go check on him and he tells us he's fine but he wasn't driving the car. He also didn't know who was driving the car. And he had clearly been drinking. During the ride to the he told me that as long as the cops don't find you in the car, the local DA won't pursue drunk driving charges. All you had to do was get out of the car and walk away from it. I remember getting into a festival and seeing a magician guy do tricks on the people searching him to distract them from the drugs he had on him. Spectacular show. And I'm sure he made good profit. If the police officers knew, they'd be talking about it on here. But I doubt it. Not a police officer, but I once dealt with a criminal who forged court documents facilitating his own release from prison. Edit. Wow, my first silver. Thank you, kind stranger. Edit. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the gold. My first silver and my first gold in one day. I believe this guy was eventually caught, but his idea was impressive. CNET.com news: bank robber hires decoys on Craigslist, fools cops. He posted a Craigslist ad and had a bunch of people show up dressed like him. He then robbed the armored car and ran off behind the bank and escaped on an inner tube. I think I read it on Till. Homeless guy in my hometown figured out if he committed some act of petty theft he'd get a night in jail, a warm place to sleep and a hot meal. He'd show up, turn in his stolen goods and that would be that. After a while the police would just tell him to take back whatever he stole the next day. Quite the town character. Possible urban myth but I like it. Somewhere in England there was this car park outside a local tourist attraction. Because it was city land a booth was set up to collect parking fees. It cost something like $5 per pounds, euros to park. The old man collecting the fees was a pleasant chap. Never missed a day of work in 10 years. Rain or shine. One day the tourist attraction hears there is nobody manning the booth. Because it is a city-owned lot. They call the city to ask where the parking attendant is. The city says, "What parking attendant?" Old man was never heard or seen again. He built the booth himself and manned it for 10 years. Not a policeman but several years ago in Cape Coral FL. A man waited on a sidewalk in front of a Publix grocery store and used a taser on an armored car guard carrying 2 bags of money. A getaway driver in a car with stolen tags pulled up. Taser guy and money bags get in and they took off. Never caught. When I first moved to the area in the 90s, a man robbed a bank. Jumped on a bicycle that he rode down a footpath through some woods, where he had left a boat on a waterway. Never caught. I remember some thieves would go and trigger the alarm of a vacant Blockbuster after they all started closing down. They did this for 2 weeks straight. So I guess the cops became convinced that this was a false alarm going off at the exact same time every night, so they stopped rushing to investigate. One day we find out that the pharmacy next to the Blockbuster was broken into through the wall they shared. Not only that, but there was only one tiny section the wall that wasn't covered in shelves and panels in the pharmacy. So the thieves had to know exactly which part of the Blockbuster wall to break through. Still pretty impressed by the heist these junkies managed to pull off. A couple of my friends from high school. They were brothers. Stocked shelves, worked in the back during the night, right around when the PS4 was released. They mostly emptied a big bag of dog food and stuck 2 or 3 PlayStations in there. Resealed it and waited a few days to buy that bag from the back. I'm not a cop but I graduated with a dude that traveled around to different Walmarts around the country and bought computers cash. He would take some parts out of the computer and then return it keeping those computer parts and then selling them. He made over $1 million doing this and got caught. Now every Walmart that he hit has a separate charges against him and it's going to take a while for Walmart to build the case up. It's sad to see him go but he was pretty cool to hang out with but I think his flashy new Corvette gave it away. Learns about smartest criminals becomes smartest criminal himself. There was a guy with over 50 speeding charges. With the name, Prawo Jazdi. He was in a different car, with a different disguise every single time. Eventually, after the government set up a special task force to take down this guy, they realized that Prawo Jazdi means driver's license. In Polish, clarification, it was 50 different people. The police just wrote down their name as Prawo Jazdi every time someone with a Polish driver's license was caught speeding. Heard a story from a coworker. Guy was a boss and never got caught but he was apparently constantly pulling this sort of bullshit. What bullshit you ask? Well, he used to go take cars for test drives. Only cars will full-size spare tires. He'd go down a side road, get out and hide the tire off in nearby woods. Then return the car and go grab the tire. An interesting way to get 4 matching tires. Just pick 4 different dealerships. And the dealerships would never even know something happened till they sold the car. At that point, it could be an issue where the factory forgot to install it, and even if that was known not to be the case, how do you figure out which of the many people that test drove the car took the tire? I'm not a cop but I would say D.B. Cooper deserves a mention. Dude hijacked a plane, got ransom money and released all the passengers. Had the plane take off again, then during the second flight parachuted out of the plane and was never caught. There's a hoarder on block whose porch is covered in junk. There's also someone trying to sell their house. For some reason people on Craigslist seem to think that everything on the hoarder's porch is free to take even though the hoarder has made numerous calls to the police saying it isn't and denies posting it on Craigslist herself. I wonder who could have the motive to do such a thing. Not a police officer but when I was younger and worked retail we had some kids come in and take a bunch of Nike sneakers. They had one person go to the opposite side of the store and set off a bunch of firecrackers. When loss prevention ran over to see what was happening they ran out the emergency door on the opposite side of our building. I figured it out real fast and chased after them but they had a getaway car waiting and they almost ran me over. I investigate white-collar crime. If they're smart they just work within the law and are called shrewd businessmen. Or businesswomen. I only catch the dumb ones. Not a cop. But, valet operation downtown at an athletic club. Customer comes out to retrieve their vehicle but the valet cannot find the customer's keys. Not totally uncommon for a valet to lose a set of keys. Valet calls a cab for the customer to get home and arranges for new set of keys to be made in the morning. Come back the next morning and the car is gone. Turns out, at some point earlier that night when the valet had left to retrieve another guest's vehicle, a man dressed as a valet walked up to the key box and took a set of keys and simply walked away. The smart part was, he didn't immediately take the vehicle. He patiently waited until the middle of the night when no one was there and simply walked up, got in and drove off with the vehicle. Not one but Frank Abagnale Jr. Must have been pretty good. Not a cop. When I was a kid, all the schools in the district, 5 at the time, got a bomb threat called in early in the morning. Police were spread thin, coordinating with bomb squad, clearing the schools, and transferring kids that hadn't heard schools were closed. During all the chaos, 2 people robbed a bank that was the furthest from all the schools. Police response time was practically non-existent. They got away with close to $50. Never were caught. Saw a 2020 on a scam where these folks set up fake trade schools, then get some homeless people, feed them and have them fill out student loan applications. The school existed but it was totally bare bones. They made millions. This was many years ago, but I don't think the for-profit schools are much different. In Burlington, Ontario, a few years back, some guys broke into an empty office building above a bank, and over a span of a weekend, drilled through the floor, ceiling. They eventually got in through their roof hole, grabbed several duffel bags of cash and ran for it. No alarm was tripped. So the bank and the cops were initially confused until they found the hole, and lots of cutting equipment. Smart. Daring. But they still got caught. The Spec.com news story, 2,526,225 arrested after daring bank heist in Burlington. A guy buys and finances a car, doesn't make a single payment, and after 90 days the repo men come looking but can't find it. Behold over 5 years later, auto repair and customization shop files a mechanic's lien on the vehicle for over $15,000 of custom rims, tires, upholstery, engine work, and a completely awful paint job. So the auto finance company is not gonna shell out $15K to get this now non-desirable car. So they sign the title over to the mechanic, who just happens to gift the car to the original owner. The original owner's credit is ruined, but what does he care? He has a brand new car, which he had been driving after about 6 months of hiding it. Pure effing genius. My dad told me a story about a crew of shoplifters who would go into expensive tailors and the like and release a pigeon. While everyone was fussing over trying to capture the pigeon, they would help themselves to a few suits, etc. Before the days of security cameras, so seems like it could have happened. Well, there was this one guy. Well, call him Jack. Now, Jack stole stuff but also involved a lot of people. One time, he was planning to steal a whole bunch of cars, all luxury cars. So what he did was he got his people to call 911, etc. from all different places and countries to tell them that car theft was taking place in multiple places. Oh, he also only used a few people each time, so it was different voices, people, locations, etc. So the police went each time until he actually did the crime. Then no one came. He was never caught. When the owner of those cars came, the police didn't believe him. 10 out of 10 genius right there. The smartest criminals are the ones none of us know about. Often we don't even know a crime was committed until it's way too late. My friend was a vice cop and once told me about a guy who was the largest drug trafficker in the state. By the time they realized who he was, he had left the country and presumably was living under a new identity somewhere in Europe or Asia. This was 9 years after he handed down the business to the people who worked for him. They estimated that when he left, retired, he had no less than $200 million somewhere. They've never been able to locate it. Not exactly the same. But I am a cyber pie, and had a case where an escort was working 3 sugar daddies. She convinced each one of them to buy her a boob job. She collected $4,500 from each of them and pocketed the difference. She got a set of boobs and $9,000. Each guy thought they were the only ones until I uncovered the enterprise. One of the daddies was a married CEO. When I figured it out, I totally did the Ron Burgundy golf clap. I'm not even mad. Edit. Go figure, my highest ever comment is about boobs. A friend of mine robbed a major truck stop and got $400. Mostly worthless checks but a buttload of cash. Lived the high life for a summer and turned himself in. He buried about $50 in cash, so when he got out he dug it up, served his time and still had money. No clue where he is now. Probably in jail. Think it was last year. Some bloke in France went to one of those big-ass supermarkets in which they have pretty much everything and took a PS4. Proceeded to rip off the label and went to the produce section and weighed the PS after having selected apples. Sticks the printed price for apples to the PS. Man paid $9 for a PlayStation and walked out of the store. 1. Think they caught him after the fact though. I was working construction at an Audi dealership putting on a new facade. During the construction they had decided to put new roll-up doors in. During the process, thieves walked right in and up a ramp where all the Audi 8s were parked. Being as it was in a dealership, they leave the keys on the tires where they are parked. They turned then on and drove out in the middle of the night with about 4 or 5 of the suckers. About $1 million in cars just drove out of the dealership. Not a cop. There is this large event in downtown San Francisco called Santa Con. Pretty much just thousands of people dressed as Santa getting drunk, stoned in Union Square. A guy dressed as a Santa walked in and robbed a bank and left, disappearing into the mob of other Santas. Not sure if they ever caught him. I think it was in Edmonton. A used car dealer, body shop would buy up smashed up semi-luxury cars from a scrapyard. He would then steal an identical car and swap the VIN from the crashed cars to the stolen ones and claim he did the restoration and sold the stolen ones. Years ago my mom worked at a Macy's that had a few thefts. A guy would walk out with stuff like a surfboard the mannequins were posed with and such. No one thought to stop him until after he left because the store didn't sell those items. I guess people assumed it was someone paid to rotate which props were in the store. There was a bank robber who would jump in his car and flee the scene in a cloud of rubber with the engine screaming. Then he'd park around the corner, strip off his overalls, get onto a push bike and ride back past the crime scene on the way home. He was caught when he was knocked his bike by a speeding police car responding to the robbery. Not a cop, but heard a great story. Guy goes to tire repair shop and stands in the parking lot, waits for a car he likes, greets customer and asked if they are getting work done. They reply, yes. Guy asks if he can pull it in the bay. She obliged. He left with car. Doug Judy, known as the Pontiac Bandit. Calvin. Ha ha, I have turned myself invisible. By removing my clothing, I can perpetrate any crime undetected. I have complete freedom. I can get away with anything. Mom. Calvin. What on earth are you doing in the cookie jar without your clothes on? Original. Probably this guy. Not a cop. A couple years ago this man went into a bank near me with a note while he was recording the bank teller. He didn't bring a gun or a mask and the note was asking for money with please written somewhere. She complied and he walked out. She called the cops and then when he was arrested he tried to get out of it saying he never robbed her. He just asked for money. And I don't know how I'm a robber because I asked for it. She could have said no. And I could have left. Lol. Well, he got 3 years in prison. He was smart but not smart enough. Source. VA Beach Instagram bank robber. Heard a story at school of this man who was drunk driving and caused a pretty serious car accident downtown. The accident just so happened to have occurred near a gas station. So the man quickly left his car, ran to the gas station, bought a 6-pack of beer, and downed 2 of them. Once the cops arrived he showed them the receipt, proving that he had just purchased the beers to cope with the trauma of the accident. The cops had no proof that he was actually drunk driving. A homeless man who rigged a bottle recycling machine at the supermarket by figuring out a way to tape a valid barcode inside the machine where the sensor would read it, and would proceed to insert cups for the machine to crush. Step 1. Tape barcode inside machine. Step 2. Insert cup. Step 3. Step 4. Profit.